Activate your energy.
Welcome to the Activated Authors Podcast, a show where we distill the core principles of what it takes to become a happy, healthy, and productive author, no matter what stage of the journey you're at. I'm your host, Daniel Willcocks. I'm an international best-selling author, as well as an author coach, speaker, and creative entrepreneur. But most importantly, I'm a lifelong student of all things productivity, psychology, and human behaviour. Thank you for joining me for today's episode. Without further ado, let's dive in. What is up, Activators, and welcome back to another episode of the Activated Author Podcast. My name is Daniel Willcocks, and here with me every single week is
Samantha Frost. That's me. Hello.
Hi, Samantha Frost. How you doing? How's your week been?
What day is it?
Thursday, as of recording.
Oh yeah, because we do this every Thursday. I don't remember.
I tell you what this week has been, because if we're going to timestamp this as to what happened, the thing that wasn't before that suddenly is now is that Friday you called me with a suggestion.
Yeah, I get into trouble for doing this.
Yeah, it's a problem. What happened on Friday?
I called Dan and I said, "Oh, I've got an idea," and Dan was like, "Okay, what is it?"
There's like a real visceral stomach drop, like, because I know that the ideas are good, and I know that it's probably going to happen. I know that it involves work, but
So much fucking work.
but like, it's a good idea, and we're not like, although this will have been in the ads on the podcast. For those who are unaware, because this is going out on, I want to say Monday, pause for effect,
29th.
30th. So there will be a couple.
Oh yeah, of course.
There'll be a couple of days left for people who haven't gotten involved.
Not that matters, because it is open all month. But yes, I said I have an idea. Why don't we run a Flash Fiction February? And then we had a little chat, and Dan was like, "Why don't we publish an anthology?" And I was like, "Yes, this is all amazing." And then it was like, "Cool, what do we have to do?" And then a list as long as an Andrex puppy nicking the loo roll appeared, and we have been, I would say steadily but manically ticking things off since. And I'm exhausted, and that's why I don't remember much of this week.
Yeah, that's exactly why. And I will say, just for people watching this on YouTube, there is a lag on your video that comes and goes, Sam, but your audio is so as long as we can speak, that's what matters.
Okay.
But yeah, that's kind of been my week as well. So we went from Friday kind of kitting it all out, sorting out all the stuff, launched it all on Monday just gone, and so we now have like, I think almost over 100 people signed up to be involved. We've got a bunch of people over in the Facebook group getting ready, getting chatty and getting involved. And so just for people who aren't familiar with what's going on, what is Flash Fiction February, Sam?
Oh gosh, I'm already, I haven't even finished yet, and I'm already like so basically Flash Fiction February is a writing challenge. You are tasked with writing a piece of flash fiction every day. And if you sign up for the challenge, you get the prompts directly into your inbox every morning. So each day is a different prompt. There will be a few challenge prompts in there, so things that are obviously, well, a little bit more challenging. And from the moment that we send the email, you have 36 hours to write a piece of fiction, 1,000 words or less, and return it to us to be in with a shot of being published in Activated Authors' first ever flash fiction anthology, where all the profits go to charity, and that is World's Lands Trust. And it's not too late to get involved. I mean, obviously it hasn't started yet, but it's not too late to get involved at any point, because the challenge is open all month. So you just head on over there, sign on up, it's completely free, and there you go. Can you tell that I've been making videos?
That was perfect. That was
Thank you.
Wonderful. So yeah, it's a challenge birthed from the fact that, you know, that beginner energy that comes from setting New Year's resolutions, all that kind of stuff, likely has started to peter out towards the end of January, and arguably, according to statistics, about 3 or 4 days into January. So for those who are trying to build a writing habit, those who want to just, you know, create some stories and have a bit of fun, like every single day in February, jump over into our Facebook group, talk to other writers, you'll get your prompts, you can write a story. And that's the amazing thing about flash fiction, like up to 1,000 words can mean you write a story in 4. So play with it, stretch, experiment. And for people who haven't written flash fiction or aren't really familiar with how it works, I have written a blog all about how flash fiction works and why it's kind of amazing to do over on the Activated Authors blog. And one thing that, as I was writing that, I've overlooked it is when the Other Stories podcast started, which for people unaware, that's a podcast that I co-founded with some people from the Hawk and Cleaver Story Studio, has since had 10 million downloads across a bunch of different stories. We've published lots of different writers. It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
When we first started, it was me and the three other guys, Ben Arrington, Luke Condor, and Matt Butcher. And our original word count was 1,000 words. So I hadn't even considered the fact that that was flash fiction to begin with. And I think that really was the ultimate playground for me, trying to find my voice and trying to work out my genre and trying to like just see what I wrote as. Because my first story, I distinctly remember being fresh off the back of reading Terry Pratchett's Color of Magic, and also his Blink of the Screen short story collection. And so it's very cheeky. It's really not that horror-y. I've since rewritten it to make it darker, but it wasn't very horror. It was very sort of light-hearted and quirky and weird. And then my second story was a bit more almost like documentary style, and it really was an experiment in finding my voice. So like flash fiction as a form to just write something, play, experiment, and see what connects with you. It's just a fantastic way to get over that initial bump as a writer, because I think it's easy for people to be like, I want to be a writer, I'm going to write an 80,000 word novel, speaking
Yeah.
and that will teach you a lot, but I think you need to learn the mechanics of writing first, and flash fiction particularly is fantastic for that.
Yeah, and I think where this challenge is kind of unique and like sets itself apart from things like Nano and stuff, is that with a larger writing challenge, you are working on one thing consistently throughout the month to hit that like huge word count goal. But with this, it's like shiny penny month.
Yeah,
like you get to
I
start
love it.
and finish something like within, I mean, you have 36 hours, but obviously I assume you'll be sleeping at some point during that. Please sleep during some point of that. So like you say, if it's really short, you could start and finish in an hour or like in a few hours, and I love that feeling of like sitting down, starting something and just doing it until it's finished. And like, yeah, shiny penny month.
Could be 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Like who knows what kind of story you want to write. And just for people who are wondering, so there's going to be a different prompt every single day, so there's 28 total. As Sam says, 36 hours to submit each story, so there is a deadline for that. But if you are joining late in the month, if you're listening to this podcast and it's say the 5th of February or even like the 27th of February, you can still get involved. Like,
it's not too late.
You don't have to tick off every single day. Obviously, the more stories you submit, the more chances there are of being in the anthology. But it's one of those, if you're coming late to this, just jump in, just go over to the website, get involved, and join us.
Yes, please.
It's going to be real fun. I'm really looking forward to it.
I know. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm very excited to like properly sit down and just read a load of different kind of stories from different viewpoints. It's one of my favorite things about the creative brain is how like people just can get things from all different angles.
And one of the amazing things about, because this will be the possibly the fourth anthology that I've put together now. One of the amazing things that I would recommend if anyone ever gets a chance just to like critique or read other people's work, or just be, because there are lots of publishing companies that do look for what they call slush readers, like people to help them read through submissions and stuff. It's such a fantastic tool just to like speed up your process of learning, what writing works for you, what doesn't, and trying to like see how different, like say how different people approach that particular stimulus. So like, yeah, something to look out for. But yeah, all of that's over at activatedauthors.com. Surprise, surprise. That's not the link. Let me start again. activatedauthors.com/flash.
That's
which is
right.
horrible to say, I've realised. I've done a couple of videos. I'm like, activatedauthors.com/flash. /flash.
You try saying, welcome to Activated Authors Flash Fiction February.
Flash Fiction February. At least that's not /flash fiction. Wow. So what's your key takeaway for this week?
So my key takeaway is very closely bound to Flash Fiction February. And it's something that my son said, and I can't remember the context, but like he'd watched a video, he'd seen something, and he was telling me about it, and he said the thing is, people don't realize that you just every now and again he says something very wisdomous, and the rest of the time he says highly inappropriate things. But he said the thing is, what people don't realize is that when you choose an action, you also choose the consequence.
Just let that sit.
Right?
Mm.
And I was just like, I do this to myself. The reason I am so tired at the minute and
Doesn't
a
that
little bit
hurt?
grumpy.
Comes from your own spawn.
Yeah. Well, because like his entire life, I've said to him, like, every action has consequences and these are yours. Like, whether it's negative, positive, neutral, whatever, like, it's one of those phrases that when he's older, he's probably going to speak to a therapist about, because I say it way too much. But to have it kind of mirrored back in such a beautiful way. I mean, I'm pretty sure like 10 minutes later, he like headbutted the wall and then was like, why does my head hurt? I mean, not exactly, but you know what I mean? But it floored me. So that is my key takeaway. When you choose the actions, you also choose the consequence.
Yeah.
There you go.
So
what about you?
Yeah, so mine for this week is one of those ones that, like, full transparency, I'm not fully in a place to discuss a lot of it, but it's I can't remember where I picked it up from, but it's been in a couple of things I've seen this week, which is like sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is ask for help. And there have been like a few things that I've been struggling with over the last week that are pretty big, and for people listening or worried or anything, like there's nothing to worry about. Like, I'm okay, but there's just like some big residual things that I'm trying to like work through at the minute. So yeah, sometimes like asking for help is the best course of action, and it's hard, like,
Yeah,
because there's a real expectation sometimes, and I think, like, particularly I will speak from like the male population, like it's there's an expectation that, you know, it's the male that will prop up and will, you know, not crack and all that kind of stuff. And although we know that's bullshit, like, and I know that's bullshit, like, lots of that kind of pressure's the wrong word, but like that expectation kind of like lingers. And
oh yeah, societal pressure, I think it's still very much there.
yeah, so suffice to say, working through some stuff. Yeah, just reach out and ask for help if you need it.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. And
Yeah,
I completely agree. Like, the first time I realized that, you know, it's the strong people can ask for help.
yeah. And apologies if people heard that little mini burp that I tried to hide.
Oh,
Just pretend I didn't do it.
I think it happened at the same time I opened my sparkling water, so guaranteed there's going to be more little burps hiding.
Hey,
Just realized I haven't taken. I just realized I hadn't taken my. I was like, probably get on that before I start to go loopy.
Yep. Our win from the community this week comes from none other than Mr. Rob, who says, I survived the first day back at the day job after 2 weeks off, small wins, made some life decisions that will bring the business forward faster than I originally planned for, always amazing, and started reading a few new books in my target genre to refill the well. So they, like, the triple whammy, whack, whack, whack.
Yeah. Can I just say, it was really nice because Rob was in sprints today, this morning. I hadn't seen him for a little while. It was really nice to see your face again, Rob. So if you listen to this, bring your face back more often, please.
If you're not, why don't you listen to the podcast? Like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah, and if everyone's like, who's Rob? Well, then go watch the Christmas quiz episode, because he's on my team and he's a legend.
Yeah, yep.
His actual name is Robin. I make a joke about it being Robert, like his actual name's Robin.
Don't get many Robins these days.
No, Dick Tracy. Not Dick Tracy. That's a detective. I'm so tired. It is completely by the by. What is Robin's name? It's Dick something.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Robin, Batman and Robin.
Oh,
is it Grayson? No.
Yes. Yeah. No.
Dick Grayson.
Yes. Maybe.
Please let us know in the comments. I mean, I'll have Googled by then, but
real name. No, that's Robin Miriam Carlson. That's the singer. This is. I'm not moving on until we've done this.
Okay.
Robin is a. Oh my God! It is Dick Grayson. There we go. Thank you. I thought it was.
Yeah, not Dick Tracy, which was a private eye.
No, later Nightwing, I believe. Anyhow, so into today's question.
Well, today's question is, I can't remember the wording of it. Please remind me.
What makes a good book cover?
Thank you. Today's question is, what makes a good book cover?
Okay, so this is one of those questions that I do get a lot of, and it's one of the ones that is quite difficult to answer because getting a design eye or understanding how good a design works or is interpreted by a reader is a skill that you learn over time. It's one of those things that you
Hmm.
train. But there are some fundamentally useful bits of information that I can especially give during this episode, just to kind of like help you move in the right direction of knowing what a good book cover is, and what a not so good book cover is. Before I kind of dive into some points, Sam, do you have anything you want to set up with or say on?
Yeah, so I obviously, well, I say obviously, I have yet to publish my first book. Is slated to be published later this year, hopefully two, but that might be pushing it. So I've not currently been through the actual process myself. Like, I've done a lot of research on it. I've read your notes on it in Self-Publishing Blueprint,
Mhm.
but as I haven't actually been through the process myself, I feel that it would be a little bit disingenuous for me to like sit and list through points and things. I definitely have some opinions on stuff, and I will chime in because that is my prerogative, my want, and just my general nature. But I think for the most part, I shall sit and nod while you talk. So talk.
Yeah, and I will add as well, as a painter and an artist, like you do have a fair amount of knowledge on design and creation and stuff.
Thank you.
So I think the way to set this up is like to answer the question simply, what makes a good book cover, and the answer can only really be it's a cover that sells to the reader, converts from what is this book into I want to read this book. And the old adage, never judge a book by its cover, is absolute fucking bollocks,
It's
because
bullshit, mate. That's what they're for.
what's the point in having a book cover? Like, if you're not going to judge a book by its cover, why isn't every book cover just black, just plain black or grey or white or red or whatever? Like,
Don't even bother with the title. Just
no,
like pick a mix.
you just
Well,
walk
this
through.
one might be good.
You just walk through the Odeon or the cinema of choice, and every poster board is just white and just like text on it. It just says like Batman or The Whale or whatever. Like,
I'll go to screen 7 to see the white poster, please.
yeah,
Are you
yeah.
sure I don't mean screen 8? No. Yes? No. What?
But that's the point. Like, your book cover should be exciting. It should pull a reader in. It should be something that converts and gets them to go like, I want to read this book. This looks exciting. This meets my expectations. And you'll notice that kind of a theme that's emerged from a lot of like the past episodes on like tropes and genres, like expectations is a very big word. And
Yeah.
the reason for that is because there's already expectations in place of what people would like to see from the books. Like, there's a reason when you go into a bookstore and you go to like the YA fantasy section, that loads of the covers look somewhat similar. And there's a general theme and there's a general placement. And at the minute, like I've noticed, and I'll say like fantasy, particularly YA fantasy, isn't my blend, isn't my genre. But even I can see that the trends over the last few years have gone from having very sort of like character-led covers into now just being focused on the text and the fonts and the iconography and how that all works. And
Yeah,
much more
those silver,
artsy.
like almost like silver bladey kind of
Yeah,
text on a lot of fantasy with like a few random bits dotted in around that either has something to do with the title or the story.
yeah, just realized I meant typography, not iconography. But yeah, so all of that to say, like, there is, although book covers on the whole can be subjective, there are again expectations and boundaries or parameters within what readers expect and what will sell.
Mm-hmm.
And as you mentioned, like in the self-publishing blueprint, I do have a full chapter on book covers, and I use a couple of specific visual examples of
Mm-hmm.
how some of this can work. But broadly speaking, again, staying very, very top level at the minute, a book cover. What's the phrase that I normally use? It's like your book cover is a book cover, not a piece of artwork.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I again, like all of this, I'm speaking from experience, because when I first picked up, writing seriously in sort of 2014, I started to look at book covers and things, and like anyone that wants to go on my Instagram and like has the time to scroll right down to the bottom can see my journey into how I understand book covers, because I started making my own. I started playing a bit with design. I picked up Photoshop and started doing bits and pieces. And my first ever novel, which was called A Clockwork Rose, which was never released, was a kind of, because it was like 5 different genres, and it was just a
And it
book.
was called A Clockwork Rose.
It's called The Clockwork Rose, and there's a reason for that, which is quite sweet, but won't go into it. But the point was, it was like quite an edged cat and mouse thriller type thing. And so I remember creating a cover that was, I thought, very, very pretty. And even in hindsight, I'm like, actually, like as a piece of art, it looks nice.
Mm-hmm.
But like now with a much more experienced eye, I'm like, that would never have converted or told people what that story was, because like the image was wrong, the text was wrong, the colors were wrong. And Zach Bohannon, who's like I'm happy to say like a friend of mine who I've kind of been swimming in the same circles with for a fair few years. I remember at the time he was a couple of years ahead of the journey on than me, and we chatted a couple of times over Instagram. And I put that image up on the Instagram and just went like, I'm so excited! This is a cover for my next book. And he put, well, what genre? What are you trying to achieve with it? And I told him, and he just went, well, it's wrong. And it was one of those things where at the time I was like, I spent ages on that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think it looks really good. But he was right. He was absolutely right. And, you know, besides the fact that the story's never going to be released because it was just like my first book that I needed to get out and it's nothing to what I write now. The cover and that lesson itself was like, oh, like there really is a difference between art and book covers. Anything on that before I plow forward?
Well, I mean, obviously, I completely agree with you. But yeah, I think it's very easy to kind of lose yourself a little bit. You know your story really, really well. By this point, I mean, well, I say that like if you know you're getting your book cover once you've kind of been through all the processes. I know some people like to get them first. But just because you know it really well, it doesn't mean that like niche reference that you're gonna like make into the cover is going to translate. I think sometimes people either go way too subtle, or they're so scared that like the book cover is going to ruin the whole story for the reader, that like it has nothing to do with the book. And there is a reason people say like a picture tells 1,000 words, and that's the entire point. It is an advertisement for what's inside, and you wouldn't buy like a box of cereal if it had a toaster on the front.
No.
So like, you know, it's just a case of knowing that you have to kind of be a little bit obvious, a little bit on the nose, and that doesn't mean it has to be like cheap or tacky or anything like that. Just I think by just literally walking into a bookshop and looking on the shelf at books that are in a similar genre to you, you will get like a feel for what the reader expectation is at this moment for that genre, and then you can take that and put your own spin on it while keeping it consistent with, you know, what your readers are going to buy. Like they're not, you can't reach people without them knowing what it is that they're trying to get.
No.
So yeah, don't draw a toaster. Cornflakes, I guess, is what I would say.
Yeah. So the place to start if you're kind of new into book covers, or if you're like even playing around and you're not quite sure that you're there, we spoke again. Like a lot of these lessons come back to an area of publishing that I think is just vastly overlooked, especially when you're writing your first book, which is market research. Again, this goes back to our tropes, goes back to our genres, everything else. Because if you can nail down everything that you need to know about the thing that you want to write before you start doing it, like just this whole process becomes easier. And again, this is speaking from someone that didn't do that for the first like couple of books that I put out, and like my first book covers aren't anywhere near as sort of targeted and focused and as well converting as they are now, because it was a journey I had to go on to, you know, see what that was and to experience it. But in the market research, you want to really just get just overly familiar with every single type of book cover that is in your genre, because there will be a range, but there will be massive similarities across the board of what there is that you can see visually. So like a good place to start, Amazon. Go into Amazon, type in, like for me, I can type in cosmic horror and I can see like all the different styles of books that are coming out in that style, and kind of like try and look at the rough things that are on all the books. You know, if you're writing cozy mystery, there's an expectation there. And I'm lax to kind of say some of my assumptions in these because I'm not in that genre, but I like cozy mystery. I believe there's a lot more like illustrated and cutesy sort of colors and pastels and stuff, versus your thrillers, which are very sort of what they call sans serif fonts. So without all the embellishments, they're very sort of straight, sharp letters. Normally like a silhouette on the front and some like beach or lighthouse or dramatic sort of scenery behind in quite contrasting colors. Obviously fantasies a lot more ornate. You'll get like probably much more custom illustrations, sort of images and things like that. So it's really diving into what your genre is. Like I can't emphasize like how much easier it makes the rest of your life if you can nail down your genre. And once more, this is speaking from someone who has gone around the houses quite a lot himself. So like, yeah, if you can look that up. Just what I tend to do is I do tend to find writers who are writing similar to what I believe I'm producing. Even before I've like written the story, I'll have like a nugget of what that could be, and I'll go onto their books. I'll copy their covers into a Word document, so I've got like a visual representation of what they are. I'll then probably go into their also boughts. So for people who
Hmm.
that, like on the Amazon pages, that will have like a little carousel underneath which shows what readers of that book also bought. So normally there's sort of like a crossover between the types of books there. See if there's any similarities, and also very very specifically anything that pulls my attention. Not
Yes.
every cover is going to be great, but if you're looking at one going, oh, that's like that really caught my eye, really pay attention to that, because if it's catching your attention, it's likely it's going to catch someone else's attention who likes the things that you do.
Hmm.
So I will literally, and I've got like loads of these on Notion for different things, just like boards of just different books just to see the covers.
I've
Um,
seen them. There's
yeah,
so many.
and then
Yeah.
once you've got that, you can then kind of like take a bit of a step back and start to look at what it is about those covers
Hmm.
that you like, and you'll see the similarities. And that really is just a strong place to start to see what your ideal book cover will look like. I'm
Yeah.
going to keep doing these pauses because I don't like. I'm conscious that sometimes I speak fast and I don't want to like just pow through information.
I was just going to say, I was just thinking while you were talking about that. I think when I first started looking, I think I realized that I knew, if you are a book reader yourself, like you will subconsciously know a little bit anyway, but I think obviously trends and such grows and changes, so it's always best to, obviously do research of the books that are coming out now, and going to your bookshelf, if you have a load of classics, and kind of modeling after one of those is probably not the best idea. But I was just thinking, as you were talking, like you'll start to see things like color palettes
Hmm.
and texts and things. Like, when there's a charity bookshop near me which I love, and I can literally just walk along and look at the spines, and I know when I've reached something that interests me,
Yeah.
because like that's because it's designed really well. um and the last thing I'll say is that I think people can get very precious over what their book cover looks like, but I think it's really important to bear in mind that the book cover is not for you.
Yes.
It's for the reader. It is like it's flagging your like ideal readers down and saying, me.
Yeah.
Pick up me.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the what you said about color palettes, and the reason I
Hmm.
kind of had a bit of a glazed look a second ago is I was just double checking the name of this service that I've used a few times, which is called Kindle Trends. So Kindle
Mm.
Trends is a fantastic. It's a newsletter that you sign up to, and what that does is, depending on your preference of like weekly or monthly, it gives you a digest of the top sort of 100 sellers within that category that you've chosen to receive the newsletter from. And within that, it's got all different things like keywords that are being used a lot in titles. It's got color palettes, and it will show you like the common colors broken down from the top 100 within that category, so you can see sort of trends and things. And yeah, it's just a really good tool to get a bunch of information on covers. And as I say, it gives you the top 100, so it will save you having to kind of go on Amazon, because it will just drop straight into your inbox. So Kindle Trends is a fantastic tool, and I believe there is a cost associated with that. I can't remember what it is, but it's well worth it. Like, I've used it a few times, and you get a lot of information very very quickly.
Mm.
Yeah. um and yeah, I'm really trying to be cautious here, because like I want to go into like working with a cover designer a little bit, and I think we might.
Yeah,
But at the same time, I think that's a whole episode in itself.
probably
Yeah,
another episode that I wouldn't have much to say other than like my untested opinion.
we potentially
um
a cover designer at that point. We'll see when that episode
oh,
comes.
that's true.
Potentially.
um yeah.
But yeah, so some of the main components that make up a good book cover, things to consider. Obviously, you need to pay attention to the imagery.
Hmm.
What kind of background feel you want for your story. I'll nod to Renee Gallant, who's one of our community members, and some of her work. It's historical fiction and Whispers of
They're
Deception. It's very,
gorgeous.
they are beautiful, but you have like these
Mm.
sort of very soft oranges and golds. You've got like Scottish castle in the background. It's moors. Like, you very quickly know from looking at it where it's set, the feel, the tone of what's going on, just from the components and the image itself. Um,
Yeah.
Meg Jolly as well, a friend of ours. Like she's very key about particular objects that go on her fantasy covers. So you'll see
Hmm.
like daggers, you'll see serpents' heads, you'll see all these different things, and they don't, like you say, they don't have to be specifically things from your story, but just like notes and hints of stuff that is to come that also works with the design. So imagery is a big thing in there. Um, the whether or not it's a character led cover or like more of a general image led cover, because you get genres like urban fantasy are very very character led. You'll
Yeah.
often see sort of like badasses on the front with magic glowing from their hands, bits and pieces like that. Horror kind of goes either way. Sometimes you tend to get a lot more abstract covers in horror, at least from what I've seen, unless you're Stephen King, in which case like he can do whatever he wants.
Stephen King's cover just needs to have his name on it.
Stephen King, it doesn't even need the book title, just like buy
No,
this.
I would argue just the word king on it would do.
Yeah, yeah. Although a word on that, like, so just to show the power of what a good book cover can do, there was a guy a couple of years back who made a crap ton of money off Amazon, and I will say, like, upfront, don't do this. But what he did was his name was Stephen King, but with a V instead of a PH, and he branded it in the way that Stephen King brands his books. So
So dishonest.
thousands, thousands of readers were just buying these books and then giving him negative reviews, but he didn't care because he was getting the money. And obviously, like, he ended up getting sued and it all got kind of removed. But like, that's the power of a strong book cover. Like, people aren't even gonna, like, they'll just jump into the book and go, yes, that. So it really does matter what it looks like.
Yeah.
So we've got imagery, we've got obviously sort of characters or image led sort of features, and then the other big thing is typography. Now,
Yes.
typography is something I freaking suck at the minute. Like, I've gotten better over the years, but like, it's so hard to get typography right. And I think what I see a lot of people doing is finding a really nice image somewhere and they're like, yes, this is exactly my book. And again, I did this the first iteration of When Winter Comes. I've got a cover for that was based just on the image, and then I tried to do the text myself. And I don't know how to explain it. Like, there's a psychology, there's a science behind making the text work with an image.
Hmm.
There's a balance on the page, because you can get a lot of covers that are just jam packed with like stuff happening and people and characters, and then you've got these words everywhere, and it's too much. Because
Yeah.
really, and this is why I always advise now working with a book designer. And like, even though I could, like, I feel like I'm at the point now where I could design my own like book covers, I just give it to other people because they just nail it and it saves me a bunch of time. um but you really have to like know the psychology of the reader and where the eyes are going on the page, and like, you need to have them, you know, either drawn to the image or drawn to like the title if you've got a really strong sort of sounding title. And then like everything else is layered, like whether you've got like best-selling author on there or like written by whoever's kind of like credited for the story, like whatever. Like it really is just such a psychological science
Hmm.
of covers that if you have a friend who does graphic design for a charity, again, speak you very much, like I won't,
Yes.
I won't
Oh
name it.
yeah.
I won't,
Everybody's friend that works for a charity that's a graphic designer. Go
yeah,
on.
yeah,
I
like,
relate.
but like we've all got friends that like dabble in design these days. But like,
Sure.
very very early on, I found a very nice image. I gave it to this lovely lady, and she did a fantastic job with it. In hindsight, it wasn't a book cover because she hadn't designed book covers before, and like, it
Hmm.
seems like such a pretentious or snobbish thing to say, but it's absolutely true. Like, if you are a mechanic who is trained to work on like civilian cars, you're likely not going to be as clued up on what it takes to look after a Formula One racer
Yeah. Or an aeroplane.
or an aeroplane. Like, although you could say like they all have the same moving parts generally, like don't put a turbine on your Ford Focus. Um, like, broadly speaking, they are totally different things, and it's the same with design. It really is. And the reason that cover designers, like especially like now, I just push everyone to a cover designer because there are designers that can cover a broad range of budgets.
Hmm.
Um, it saves you time, and they just know what they're doing, and they'll get you so much further than you will if you try and do it on your own.
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen I mean, obviously none of this advice applies if you yourself are a cover designer. But like, I've seen so many people say, oh, I'm going to design it myself, or design it themselves, and it doesn't feel or look like you expect a book cover to look. And then what happens is that before anyone has gone anywhere near the story, is that they see the book cover and they're like, no, and then move on. It's, I use this analogy sometimes. I don't really watch these kind of shows, but like if you think of something like X Factor, I don't even know if that's still on, like Britain's Got Talent, that kind of thing, where there's like an audition component at the beginning. You, as either a watcher or if you're in the audience, as the person walks out,
Yeah.
you immediately know whether you can relax or whether you're stressed.
Yeah.
Immediately, just by how they walk onto the stage. And that walk is your book cover. It's the same thing. A reader immediately knows whether like they have confidence in you as a writer or not. Is it fair? No, because the book is words, not pictures. I like most of the time anyway. But whether it's fair or not is by the by. That is exactly what will happen. It's the same as when you talk about like front and back matter. They might not know why they're suspicious of this book, but if something is missing or something doesn't hit in the way that particularly traditional published books hit, you are like, you're not even fighting a losing battle. Like, you're dead on the battlefield. No one is going near it.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't, because I'd be like, if you've put that much thought into the book cover, how good is the story going to be?
Yeah. It's just a disservice to your book. Like, you
Yeah.
spend months and months writing your book, editing it, making it, you know, as good as you can, as to a point where you want it to be. I just realized my light's changed and I've gone very, very orange on the camera. Anyway,
Well, I feel like I look like a ghost this entire time. I'm like, I look like death,
I
and
look
you
like
look
I
so
spent
tan,
2 weeks
and
in
I
bed.
just and I just, oh no, I feel like I look like a Grim Reaper.
But it is a disservice to your book to like not give it that final kind of like once over, just to, you know, because it is, like you say, it's the front door to someone coming into your story. And like, one of the best stories that I've read in the last few years, I wouldn't have picked up unless an author friend of mine like very aggressively recommended it to me, because I was like, it looks shit, like the cover wasn't great. And he was like, no, no, trust me, like the story's good. And this, like, it really was. Like, I've never read a story that's like made me actually dizzy with like some of the stuff that it does. And I was like literally in bed going like, whoa, like it was, oh, it's so good. But like the point being, like, why go through all that effort and then kind of like fall at that final hurdle?
Yeah, a friend, like a friend that you trust shouldn't have to hard sell you a book.
No, and just a note as to like, for the people that are wondering, like, if we know what we're talking about, like, in one of the recent masterminds, we worked with one of our friends through getting like Julie Heiner, and she got her covers, like her redone covers, entered into like awards and got into the finals. So like a lot of this stuff, like it really matters. Like before they even got into the story, like they're looking at the visuals and they're looking like just, and they are beautiful covers as well. So yeah, like there's lots of reasons why you should look at all of this. And as we say, some of the components, we got imagery, typography, tropes. I put down sort of like a series of things to consider when looking into what you'd like your cover to be. And one of those will be your price point will make a difference to the quality of the cover. There does, in my opinion, get to a point of diminishing returns depending on which cover artist you work with. But if you want to, there are people who every now and then they do giveaways of covers and stuff for free, like pre-mades and stuff. Like that can happen, not so often.
It's not worth betting your book on it.
No. But if you're kind of really not stripped, if you're really
strapped
and tight on your budget, you can get pre-made book covers. And pre-made book covers are essentially covers that artists have made for clients, and then the clients have, because normally like a cover artist might make 2 or 3 different variations for someone to pick from. If they don't like them, they don't want those covers to go to waste, so they'll then like repurpose those, and you can buy them for a reduced price, which is what we did exactly for the Bolts of Fiction anthology. We found like a very sort of literary pre-made that looks in the way that we want it to, because like with the money going to charity, we wanted to reduce the amount of like upfront production costs to claim back before the money then goes out to World Wildlife Trust. And there are some fantastic services for pre-made. It's like I spent a good 3 or 4 days at one point very, very heavily searching for horror specific ones, because there are some bad ones, but there are some amazing ones. And I will rep here, like one of my favorite ones that I go to for horror is a website called creativeparameter.com, which we will put in the show notes. There you go, Sam. But Parameter is her first name, and she has done, I've taken a few pre-mades from her, and actually it was Creative Parameter that we got the Bolts of Fiction cover from as well. And although like I love the horror covers that she does, She does a whole range of different genres as well, so it's well worth checking that website out. And they go anywhere from like $30 to $120, depending on like the genre, like how popular they are,
Hmm.
and all that kind of stuff. So pre-mades are a really, really good option. And there are, as I say, a lot of people out there doing some good pre-mades. And what I will do is I'll kind of like put a load of links into the bottom for some of the ones that I've used. Because again, like every anthology I've done has been a pre-made cover. The Omen's Call, The Other Side has been pre-mades. The Mark of the Damned, which was one of mine that I've since pulled from publication, but that was a pre-made because it just like sometimes like a cover will just speak to you. And what
Yeah.
and actually the Nowhere line, which is the book that I'm working on at the minute, came from a pre-made cover that I bought that I'm no longer using, but it was enough to inspire a story from it.
Hmm.
Which,
I love the fact that it inspired a story that it can no longer serve.
well, the story kind of took a turn of its own.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah, I don't like, the original idea would have fit it, but no longer.
Yeah.
So pre-made is a great one. Price points. So yeah, if you're tighter on the budget, pre-made's a great option to go. But also, there are services that do very, very reasonable priced covers. So 100covers.com is a fantastic service for getting a cover for 100 bucks. And the reason they can do that is they have like a team of designers. So like they will put whoever is best for your particular project on that project. And I've worked with them on a few covers. Like they did all the updates for my non-fiction books. And they've also done something else which I don't quite remember, but like it's been just a joy to work with them. They're very easy to work with. It's quite a quick turnaround. They often will do sales in which it'll be like $50 for a cover, and I am saying dollars and bucks, which makes it even cheaper for you UK listeners. I'm getting really orange on this lighting, and it's really I don't like it. What's happening.
I don't know.
There we go. That's a bit cooler. Oh, I'm peeling now. There you go. So 100 covers is a fantastic one. You can get stuff for like $100. And then, if you're a member of Alliance of Independent Authors, you get discounts at services like Miblar, who are a Ukrainian-based design company. Again, I've done some stuff with them, and they are fantastic. And again, I'll pop a load of links down below, but like that, you're kind of getting to the £200-300 range. And I think realistically for me, the most I've ever paid for a cover is £400. And that was for the When Winter Comes cover.
Worth it.
And it was worth it. It was absolutely worth it.
It's beautiful cover.
Yes, I'm very happy with it. But again, like you can go into, some designers will charge 1,000, 1,500, 2,000. Like it really depends, what it is you're looking for, how specific you are, and what you're willing to pay for it. Because like there are options all around to make a professional cover. But I do like 100. I'm not sure when 100 covers sprang up, but like I have, as I say, used them a couple of times, and I do tout them for people, especially if you're just like dipping your toes in the water and just like seeing about getting started. Like if you've got a reader magnet that you just want something a bit more professional on it, like it's a good way to go for a custom cover that won't break your bank. So that's pricing. Anything else from you, Sam?
I don't think so. I think one of my kind of low-lying fears as someone that hasn't been through this process yet is that when obviously you go onto designers' websites, a lot of this stuff looks really good, but I've seen a few times where, and obviously I won't name any names, mainly because I can't remember them, like a few times where you've worked with someone and like on their website it looks incredible, and then it comes back and I'm like, I don't believe that you designed those covers, and so that makes me a little bit apprehensive. So I don't know if you have anything to say on like how you can tell if like a designer is good or they're just like lying.
So I would say that really boils down to communication.
Okay.
Like, and again, I think that's a whole episode's worth because there's a lot to go into there. But like, how you communicate your design to a designer will dictate what you get back. Because yeah, I know what you mean. Like I've seen people who have gone to very, very reputable cover designers, and they've been very unhappy with what they've come back with. And so this is kind of where a lot of what we've spoken about comes into play, because if you can look for like relevant covers that are similar to the kind of thing you're looking for, and if you can really do your research up front so that you can present what you're looking at to these people, designers, if you will, then you're more likely to get something professional that fits the bill of what it is that you're looking for. And often the other thing as well is that you have to trust a cover designer, which I know is difficult, especially when you're putting up sort of big amounts of money. And you know, I've had a cover before, which again cost me about £400 that I've not used. Like I used it in the beginning, but it just didn't fit the purpose. And in hindsight, that was my own fault. I didn't know the genre of that story, and that was why the new cover was done for When Winter Comes. Like the original one was perfect for what I told the guy to do, but it was definitely on me that I gave the wrong information in the long run. But it's your communication up front, and then it's also trusting the designer to let them, or to believe that they know what's best for your cover. Because when you start sending back loads and loads of changes, like a couple of things happen. Like for a start, you're already saying you don't trust them. And like I think a few changes is justifiable. I think, you know, tweak this, add a bit more of that. Like I kind of want to add just this element to it. Cool, that's fine. But I know designers that have had to deal with like email after email after email. You get to a point where it's just like, why don't you design it then? And there is an untold trick in design that I have seen and I have worked within as well, within like the marketing departments that I've managed with like an internal design team, which is if a client asks for something and you really strongly believe in a particular design, you make that as strong as you can, and then you offer one that doesn't quite match up. And you'll notice that, and I've seen that with a few cover designers where like I'm like, this one's amazing, this one nowhere near what I was asking for, and they're always like, we're offering this an alternative, and I'm like, don't. But like the designers do know what they do. If you go into like a place that's been recommended, a place that is reputable, you know, like if you can send them an email and like just try and get a general upfront conversation, just ask a few questions and see how they respond, that will tell you a lot. And again, like we'll go like we'll cover a lot of that in like another episode, but like I totally got what you mean. It's a lot of that is just in the communication,
Okay.
which is a whole skill. The only other thing that the only other two things that I put on here to consider. Number one is the difference between standalones and series. So
yes,
if you are doing a series and you know you're doing a series, have an idea of what you want the series generally to look like, because each of that book, like someone should be able to pick up book 6 and go, oh, this is blah blah, which was the book that was book 1. So you know across that story that there's a continuity, there's consistency, a theme, and they all kind of match up. Like I've not done this in any of my books yet, but I really want to do the thing where you have like, when all books are collected, you have like one image. I love that so much. But yeah, it's worth kind of considering series and how they look, because also series will often look different to standalones. If you are doing a standalone, it's worth considering your brand, because there's something to be said. I've done a lot of like research and digging into this the last year or two. There's a lot to be said about having a visual expectation of a reader when it comes to your book. So for example, I am very, very deliberately culturing a mini series at the minute, which is sort of horror novellas that are written in a very particular style. They're all standalones, but they're going to be branded visually in a way similar to, if you think of like the Goosebumps series or like the James Bond books. Like they're all technically standalones. Well, yeah, they're technically standalones. But you pick one up and you know what to expect from the next, and the other, and the other, and the other. And I know a few, particularly in horror, writers who have written a lot of standalones, but just by how they visually look on the front, you're like, okay, for example, that's a Stephen King book, or that's a Jeremy Bates book, or like that's an Ian Robb Wright book. They're different stories, but they look the same. And so sometimes if you've like written one standalone, you're looking at the next cover, see if you can have that kind of theme running across your books with enough to tell that it's a different story.
It's funny you say that, because as soon as you said like Stephen King, I saw his name, because it's always the same font, it's always the same way. Like I think if, like, for example, when I take my glasses off, I'm pretty blind. I think if you like held up two covers that were the, you know, same size, all the rest of it, and same names, like kind of, I would be able to tell with my blurry vision and not being able to read the text which was King, just because it's so iconic and so recognizable as him. It's the same with like the Reacher books.
Yes, Lee Child.
Yeah, like you just, do you know what? I'd never considered that. That's blown my little mind.
There you go.
Because it's a clear stamp to the reader that like this might be a different book, but like I've written it.
Yeah,
that's really cool.
Yep,
Oh my
there's a
God,
lot.
you've taught me something. Who knew?
I'd hope so. Yeah, there's a whole lot in that, and like as I say, I've spent a good like year and a half, 2 years, kind of looking at this, particularly for horror. Um, but people like Jonathan Jans have like amazing covers. Like if you look at Richard Lehman, if you look at Nick Cutter, like they've all got very very strong visual brands, even though they write standalone books. And for people, there's a publishing house called Flame Tree Publishing that do fantasy and horror, and they are fantastic at that as well with their authors in branding in a way that it's their own, but it
Hmm.
fits the genre, and it's yeah, there's a lot to be learned there. Um, and that's on my nose, I think. So, like to sum up, what makes a good book cover is a book that converts and sells and makes your reader pick up the book. Know your market, look at competitors, really get a feel for theme and color and text and brand, and then as I said, I feel like proper teasing on this episode, but I feel like we need to do like I don't want to go into like cover design because it is like or working with a designer because it is just a whole.
It can be a part two to this, can't it?
Yeah, we'll do a part two. There we go. Our first ever part two.
Ah, to be continued.
But yeah, really, really do pay attention not only to what is in your charts, but also how you digest book covers. Like if you're walking around a bookshop, if you're looking online and your eye suddenly goes boom, like why? What is it? Really like take a moment if you can to stop and go like, was it the color? Is it the image? Is it the quality? Is it this? Is it because there are some covers like I think I've used this example to you before. This isn't a cover thing, but this is like the design psychology thing. One of
Mm.
my favorite film posters I've ever seen in my life was the Ant-Man poster. I think it was Ant-Man and
Hmm.
the Wasp. And the reason was because you had all these massive poster boards that had like, I don't know at the time, like King Kong or whatever. They're all very like packed with images. And then there was just Ant-Man written in like the Ant-Man font at the bottom, and the rest of the poster was white, apart from a little black dot in the center. And it made me go over to it, look closely, and they just put a tiny little Ant-Man in there, tiny little Paul Rudd. And I was like, that is absolutely genius because like that no, that is the extra thing I do want to say because sometimes that does subvert your expectation of what to expect. The last thing I will say on this, again, because I've been there and not saying it's a bad thing, you will feel tempted to want to do something different to catch a reader's attention.
Hmm.
And that different, there's a big chasm between what you're thinking and what's expected, which isn't always a bad thing. One thing that I've learned, and this is all about, this isn't like a hard and fast rule. Like you can get away with this, and people have if you're an indie author. Self-published authors will struggle to get away with this as often as traditionally published books. Like
Hmm.
traditionally published books, you might look at that book and go, "Well, that doesn't meet any of the conventions of what I've seen online." And also, well, no, because they have bookstores and they have shelf space and they have like huge
I mean,
marketing budgets.
yeah, I was going
So
to
they're
say an
not
entire marketing team.
exactly. They're not as bound by as many of the restrictions as we are. Like as indies, it's and again, this is always it's always about percentages and I forget the word. It's gone. It's all about like trying to maximize the chances of something happening. And again, like you can put out something completely different, and I know people that have and they've done very well from it. But if you want to maximize the chances of you successfully reaching your readers, play the game.
Yeah,
And what readers want is the same but
but
different.
different.
So
Yeah.
my example of that is and we can put this down in the links as well. There you go. In the hope that these people haven't changed their book covers. But for the book cover for my post-apocalyptic horror book that I wrote with Luke, the Rut, or they Rut, that's a post-apocalyptic book. John Crinshaw's Wizards of the Wasteland and Zach Bohannon's Dead South are all three books that fit within the post-apocalyptic genre. Look at the covers; they all look somewhat the same, but they are all different, and so it kind of is a great demonstration as to like what you can do within again the framework of what people expect. So
Yeah. I was reading an article about that recently, actually, about how like traditional, not authors, but like publishers, because you have to remember that obviously it's not the authors that most of them anyway that have a say on the cover. Like they have no say on it. Again, because it's not for them, it's an advertising tool. But yeah, I was reading something about saying that like traditional publishing houses, they set the trends, they set the precedents, and then like as indies, you'll do wise to kind of follow those. yeah, it makes sense, because like you said, they have all this shelf space, they have all of this advertising budget and huge marketing teams, whereas you're a one-man band.
Yeah.
So like, to kind of put yourself in the best position possible is to do your research on what's selling, and then use that to your advantage.
Yep. So to conclude, look for some book covers, make a bit of a portfolio, and we will see you over on the next conversation that is all about how to work with a cover designer. Because again, like, there is a lot to that. And when I was writing the self-publishing blueprint, I thought that chapter was going to be smaller, but actually writing on how to work with a cover designer became a huge thing, because speaking design is its own language in itself.
Yeah. Yeah, we just make it a little bit more like Zazzy. Could we do that?
It's just missing something.
Cool. What?
You know what I mean? Like, over.
No, it's weird. No, it's weird how I absolutely 100% don't know what you mean.
Yeah. So we'll round off there for this week. I'll put a bunch of resources in the show notes for people, for different cover designers and different things that you might find useful. And before we sign off, just a reminder that Flash Fiction February kicks off in April. Kicks off in like 2 days if you're listening to this on the day of launch. If not, I don't know when you're listening to this, so work it out. It's not my job to fix every problem.
Okay. All right, calm down.
So yeah, get involved. Flash Fiction February is activatedauthors.com/flash, and there'll be a flash, and there'll be a link to that in the show notes. And I guess there's nothing left to do other than to say a massive thank you to you, the listeners, for tuning in. We appreciate you and the time you spend with us each and every week. And as always, if you're looking to level up your writing and activate your author career, head on over to activatedauthors.com to find out all about our community, our resources, and everything else that we've got going on. One more time from myself and from Sam, we will see you next week.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Activate your energy.